We've got a series, we've got some other videos that you can watch where we're talking about the NetApp AIPod with the Lenovo and NIVIDIA. But I'm really pleased today, I've got Russell and Kirsty from NetApp, and we're going to dive a bit more into some of the customer use cases. We've been chatting around some of the kind of life applications of AI and how we're using it at home, but the NetApp AIPod has got some really interesting use cases that are quite meaningful for businesses. So perhaps if we can dive into a couple of those?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we probably should start off by saying that there's some really nice, what we call sort of horizontal use cases that have very broad applicability. And actually, in one of the other videos, we started talking about things like customer service chatbots, right? The ability to, that's not just a benefit for the organization that delivers the customer service, but obviously it's a benefit to the customer because they get dealt with much quicker.
Are you meaning chatbots where you don't just have to keep typing speak to agent until it caves and lets you speak to a real person?
We're talking about agents that can actually, we're talking about customer service chatbots and agents that can actually really deal with you. Actually help you, and actually you can reason with them, actually. It's interesting. And when I first sort of saw them as a consumer, I used a US service, and what I noticed was that initially I was, hey, I want to talk to an agent, but I realized actually that if I go and talk to an agent, I have to wait 10 minutes, right? But this virtual agent, if you will, was able to address my concern instantly. It was, I think someone shipped me something that was a light bulb, and the light bulb had smashed, and I said, hey, listen, I need to get a replacement. And they're like, okay, you need to return the old one. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I can return a bag of broken glass through the mail. It probably isn't going to work very well. And so I actually said, look, I would accept it's a box full of broken glass, and I don't think I can do that. I said, oh, no, you're right. Well, you really can't do that. So it's okay, don't return it. I'll mark it as not needing to be returned. So that was genuinely really useful for me. So that's one, customer service chatbots I think a lot of us have had exposure to. But what people might not have seen is what happens maybe inside an organization. I think productivity gains around being able to take a large corpus of information and simplify it down and essentially summarize it. So we've seen that in places like marketing, for example, where we have these kind of co-pilots that are able to take information and say, quickly find what you're looking for. So rather than having to sort of do a manual search for a piece of information within your environment, but also to summarize it across multiple bits of information, maybe take multiple documents or document briefs, for example, and combine that information into a simple answer. So that's a pretty generic use case, but actually very useful. We see that in lots of customers.
And I can imagine saves a lot of time.
It does. It does. It saves a lot. I think this is the sort of stuff that folks are already starting to see. I think what you probably haven't seen a lot of is the ability to use your own information. I think people go to things like ChatGPT, they ask a question, it's a kind of generic answer based on the information on the internet. But if you want to combine it with your own information, which most enterprises are going to want to do, right? They're not going to want to expose that information to a public chatbot like ChatGPT. You want to keep it inside. You've got your data. You've got data sovereignty concern. You've got a data gravity concern. This is where AIPod NetApp AIPod is really going to help.
And actually, what you're saying there is perfect for the fact that it gives you competitive edge as well, because if you're just accessing any data that's out there in the world, everybody's going to get the same answer, right? Yeah. Until you start pointing at the information and the data that's specific to you and your business, in which case you can then start modeling on your experiences, your customer base, where you're successful, and it gives you that edge that you want in the world that you're trying to deliver.
It's the same for customer service chatbots. Just think about it. If you hired a human off the street, I mean, they don't know anything about your products, they don't know anything about your policies, they don't know procedures or anything, right? That's what you're doing. You're bringing your data with AI to make it useful for your organization. So it's exactly, to Kirsty's point, it's exactly the same with customer service chatbots. There's a third one that we love talking about, which is something that a lot of organizations don't see, but it's actually really, really important, which is around code generation. So code generation is literally writing code. So if you're a developer, we can actually automate a lot of what a developer does. And that's an amazing thing. Huge productivity gains means that, when you're developing software, you can get to the outcome a lot quicker. I think a lot of folks think, oh, well, I don't develop software. Actually, a lot of organizations don't realize they do, but they do, right? So whether it's scripting in infrastructure, for example, so sort of infrastructure as code, whether it's building sort of extensions to existing commercial off-the-shelf applications to do something specific for your organization, so around your particular processes. There's actually a lot of that goes on, needs the skills, needs et cetera, we can automate that, we can speed that up. So a lot of those, I would argue that all three of those use cases are what I call augmentation use cases, which means that I'm not really replacing humans most of the time, I'm really augmenting humans. So for example, you mentioned, hey, you know, if that agent, that customer service chatbot agent couldn't answer my question, there's still a human somewhere.
Yeah.
Right, so there's still a human somewhere. But you know, the more that we can sort of, you know, protect the humans, if you will, from having to deal with the end customer by accelerating those outcomes through these chatbots, then we should absolutely do that.
Yeah, and I'm guessing it kind of means that your customers are getting more consistent experience.
Yes.
Because you can tell the chatbot how you want them to interact with people and the kind of service that you want them to get, rather than, you know.
Yeah, and it can also prioritize that service as well. So actually, if there is, you can use something called sentiment analysis, which is essentially predictive analysis, predictive AI, looking at historical data around, you know, they look for phrases in the call or that's been typed. If there's a bad word, if there's a bad experience, if something really needs escalating, historically you would just be put in a queue to then be dealt with. Whereas actually by using sentiment analysis, if there's an emergency, if there's a real situation that needs dealing with immediately, that can be put to the top of the queue a lot faster. So being able to actually manage how quickly an issue is resolved can really be very effective for companies with that as well.
Yeah, that sounds genius. And I guess when it comes to the production stuff, you're allowing people to be creative, to come up with ideas, to come up with solutions, and do less of the doing and more of the kind of orchestrating and the managing and the creating.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. That's true. I think one of the challenges that organizations have when they look at all of these sorts of use cases is the security concerns around them, right? So we're mentioning all these, hey, listen, I'm going to build a chatbot that does this, that, and the other. I'm building a co-pilot, but you know, a lot of concerns around, hey, if I give this co-pilot access to all this data,
all of my data.
It's all of my data, but do all the users of the co-pilot have access to all the data, and how do those access permissions flow through? So it's actually it's something we've really focused on with NetApp AIPod with Lenovo is actually to think through some of these enterprise use cases. So again, really thinking more about, hey, it's not whether I can demonstrate, whether I can do a POC and say, oh, this looks great, right? It's about whether that translates into a real world environment. And in the real world, we need to make sure that when a user asks a chatbot a question, the data that the chatbot relies upon is only the data that the user has access to at the back end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but that's real world stuff. That's the difference between, hey, I'm trying something out, and hey, I actually want to put it into production. So that is something that we've incorporated into this. And it's similar with the agents as well. You know, the agents, like any customer service agent, we don't want them to have unfettered access to everything at the back end.
Yeah.
Right? You know, when you phone up a bank, they're authenticating you. And then when you've authenticated with them, the information that the agent has is only information on your bank accounts. It's not everyone's bank account. There's no difference here, right? We really have to, I mean, so I guess in many ways, anthropomorphizing the AIs and thinking, hey, listen, it's a human at the end of the day, and I need to have the same protections in place, but you do, right? So again, applying enterprise principles around security, data protection, access controls, et cetera, to these use cases is critical. But I mean, one thing I think we should talk about is probably some vertical use cases as well.
Yeah. So industries where we're seeing interest in the NetApp AIPod with Lenovo are around where they're trying to get fast return on investment, where they want to take out the complexity of the testing the environment and the interoperability and making sure that it's going to work with their environment and with their data. We've done the hard work for them. So we've got the reference architecture. We've made sure that the platform has already been tested. It's ready to go. So when you're looking at an organization, let's take a healthcare organization, for example. Healthcare organizations are abundant and they have different departments and absolutely different access to lots and lots of different data. What they like to do is be able to have the model that's trained so they can access what they need to and then fine tune that. And the benefit of the AI pod is that it's almost like a pick up and ready plug and play environment where they can see they need to be able to do fine tuning or edge inferencing or AI inferencing around this model and to be able to deliver and use the tech that they've developed, but they don't want to then have to rebuild it and retest it. So we can plug and play this environment that allows them to go into production straight away with the model that they've used already and they've already trained. So with, as I said, healthcare, if you have a specific epilepsy environment, for example, you can make sure you can use RAG and create a chatbot specific to anything associated with epilepsy. So understanding what kind of fits are potentially going to be happening. Human-worn monitors that can understand what's happening to that person, relate it back to the data specifically to epilepsy, so that it's not having to go and search every bit of data out there, but it's very, very specific and streamlined and can give advice to not just the patients themselves, but the clinicians as well. If we're looking at a retail organisation, a lot of retailers like to look at inventory management and fraud detection or prevention rather, footfall and the layout of stores. But if you train a model centrally, often when that then moves to a store, the layout of that store is very, very different. So you need to be able to create this inferencing enablement to be able to use the trained model, but fine tune it to the environment that you're then actually deploying it within. So when you're looking at CCTV and fraud prevention and all the good things that come with the retail, it allows you to pick up that model and put it in a pre-existing, fully tested, ready to go environment using the AIPod on site, ready to go.
So you kind of got some standardized principles and then you can personalize it, make it bespoke to
very
the specific room it's in.
Yeah, and that's what it's been designed for. AI for everybody, okay? Access to AI where people maybe haven't been able to get hold of that previously because of costs associated or knowledge and know-how of how to deploy that environment. We're trying to make AI easy, so AI for everybody.
It's the repeatability, I think, is really important. So you're talking about, this probably, I call it the enterprise edge, right? Which is, hey, as you say, at a branch level, for example, you were talking about that retail asset protection example there, which I think is a really awesome one. And the reality of having to go to every store and deploy these things, you'd want to have a bit of repeatability there and standardization because you're going to be monitoring and managing it later. But just even the design on an individual basis, if you can simplify that, it's going to make that rollout a lot easier. And that's one of, as you say, really good point. Is it's one of the core areas that we focused on with NetApp AIPod with Lenovo. I was thinking, just expanding on some of the healthcare ones you were mentioning, Kirsty, there's a really interesting one around just what we call a clinical chatbot. Essentially a chatbot that, if you think about the challenge of a clinician walking into a patient room, right? And they've got many patients they're looking after. It could be hundreds on a day around, right? Remembering that patient from yesterday, or being able to, in the old days, you'd have like a clipboard at the end of the bed, right? And you start looking through. And of course, the problem with that is that you may miss something. Yeah. You've got about a minute or two that you're reading through the notes. You might miss something. Something may have been transposed wrong. Maybe you didn't spot what was new since that, the last time you were visiting with a patient. Wouldn't it be great if a clinical chatbot can simplify and summarize all those changes? So including, for example, the blood test you had an hour before, and it was instantly available through the chatbot. So again, not replacing a clinician necessarily, but making it much easier for that clinician to make accurate decisions with the most up-to-date information delivered and summarized at the point of delivery. And again, in those sorts of environments, we're obviously very worried about things like security and data, personally identifiable information and privacy. Those are all big concerns, something that we've embedded really foundationally in NetApp AIPod with Lenovo. But actually, in this particular example that I was thinking of, which is a customer in Germany, what we found was that they started off with a pilot, but they needed to scale it, right? And this is one of the cool things about NetApp AIPod with Lenovo, is the ability to scale, right? We can add additional compute nodes, the Lenovo compute nodes, really easily. So as the environment needs to expand, it was just super simple to scale it linearly without having to change anything architecturally within the solution. Really focusing on the application, the use case, rather than the infrastructure, which is what we're trying to do.